Okay, good morning. Wanted to, first of all, I appreciate you guys coming out and being a part of the webinar. Looks like we got more than a few people here, so that's great. Um, Today we're going to talk, and this is going to be, I want you to keep in mind, this is going to be a two-part series, and today we're going to go over some basics. And it's important that we talk about the how to use things as much as we talk about the tools that we're going to use. And I really feel strongly about that. And so as I prepared today, just understand that some of the things that we go over you may already know. It may be something that seems basic to you, but it's important that we start with the basics and understand a little bit about what people who are relocating to the area, to Hampton Roads, want, and also what people that are selling, and I've included them in there as well, because I think it's important to understand some of the basics of how they think and what they experience. And after all, that is what we're selling to them, is the experience of doing this. And as always, if you have any questions that you want to ask, please feel free to go and put them in the questions box, type them in. I'll be happy to answer them. A lot of times I will wait and I'll hold the questions until till the end, and that's just as much just so I can keep things going. But sometimes I will answer them and jump in, so feel free to ask them when you think about them, and just know that I will get around to them. And if I don't get around to them for some weird reason, I will make sure that I email you whatever answer that I can. And if it takes me a little bit of research to do it, I'll be more than happy to do that. The title on here on the webinar I put in here was online stuff to impress folks. I know that's a little different than some of the other stuff that than the title that we put in there before. But one of the things that I want to start with is for potential buyer clients. So we've got people that are relocating to the area. I want to talk about the experience curve and what the experience curve is. I don't know whether you've seen that before. You may or may not have. Back when I was really first getting started in the old days, you could look at the experience curve of what people were dealing with, and you could look at how they felt about the transaction. And in the old days, you know, it's funny I refer to the old days as 6 or 8 years ago, but at that point, one of the major loan companies, and I'm trying to remember, I want to say it was Quicken, but I don't remember. They went out and they did a study of what were the highs and lows emotionally as people went through the cycle of buying a property. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like for buyers and how that's changed over time. Back then it was really easy to diagram it because everybody had the same highs and lows, and it's changed somewhat now. The other thing is to remember that we're selling the experience. The whole value proposition that we have to people is that we're going to make the transaction easier for them. We're going to make it less risky. We're going to help them avoid pain, and we're going to make the stuff that's fun funner. And they'll always react more. We know that to avoiding the pain, and we're going to try and help them avoid those pitfalls. But by the same token, at the end of the day, it is all about the experience. That's what we're selling them on. Okay, the goal is to find ways to maximize the highs and minimize the lows of the experience. Now, if you think about how somebody goes through the process of buying a home, you'll see a number of things. And we're going to talk about them for potential sellers as well. Because if you think about it, they have their own experience curve. They have their own way of going through the transaction. You know, and it starts with, well, gosh, why are they even selling? For example, if a seller, and I think this is something that a lot of times we forget, is that if there's a couple that is deciding to sell their house, there's usually they'll have two different experience curves. One of them is highly motivated probably to go. Maybe they got a new promotion to a job in New York City or whatever, and the other spouse has a totally different experience curve. They don't want to move to New York City. They want to stay here. Maybe their family's here. Maybe they don't like the idea of moving. And so they experience the whole process totally differently. And so we're going to talk about some of the things that happen to that. And again, the goal, as always, is to find ways to maximize the highs and minimize the lows of the experience. And I would add a little caveat in there for everybody that's involved. I think it's important to add that in there. And that's part of the thing I think we try and do. And you probably innately do that. And you do it yourself. But it's good to think through the process in terms of what tools can you offer them that are online, and think about what effect they have, because not all tools for a potential buyer coming in, for example, if we go back up to the buyers, not every tool is that you could provide them online is going to enhance their experience. You can give them more tools, but will it really enhance their experience? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let's start with the buyer experience. And I want to go through this, and I know I'm going through it kind of slowly, and it may drag a little bit because you may think, well, gosh, I already know this stuff, Eric. But it's important to me that we have a good framework so that when we start talking about what tools that we're going to be sending to people and things that they can do, that we target the right things and run it through the filter of will it enhance their experience. So, and also realize that on this scale, if you go over here, you see where it's 100% positive, that's like ecstasy, that's like nirvana, right? And these will vary, so you can draw in your own experience curve of what you think buyers experience in your area. I just put these on here as a kind of a placeholder so that you could see a little bit about it. And 100% negative is just the nastiness, the stuff that they, you know, it's like a trip to the doctor or to the dentist for me. I'm really not a big fan of going to the dentist. So if for me, a trip to the dentist would be like a negative 90%. And if somebody could, you know, if there's a dentist out there, and nowadays they do what's called sedation dentistry, where you know, they put you to sleep so you don't even remember the process of going to the dentist. And I'm like, hey, that's beautiful for me. I love that concept, because what that does is that takes all the negative out of it and lets me just enjoy the positive, which is the fact that that my teeth are okay. But let's start with here. A typical buyer experience, and this is typical. There's other ones you could add in here and play along, but is when a couple, let's just say it's a couple, for argument's sake, says, should we buy a home? This is when they're first starting to consider the whole process of buying a home. Usually that's a really high experience, because one of them looks at the other one and says, honey, do you think we can do this? Or as in the case of a first-time buyer, at least that's how it works. Maybe they're a military relocation, and they know they've got to relocate to here, and maybe they're excited about starting a new chapter in their lives. You know, a lot of times that's a positive experience. There's very few people that start the home buying process from a totally negative space, because they're really, excuse me, they're really trying to get to the point where they can really do some good, and they're changing in their lives, and they're thinking about something positive. Then when they both decide together, that's almost always a really positive experience, where they say, okay, let's buy, let's do this thing. And they start searching, and usually the search is a really positive experience. Now I want to go back to years ago. In years gone by, you could really diagram this whole graph, the experience curve, out very easily. And you can't really do that anymore, because everybody's so different and they go through it so many different ways. In the past, for example, one of the things that you could do is, you knew the cycle, right? They said, should we buy? And then they said, let's buy. And then, you know, they started searching. Well, as part of the search, they called a realtor, because they really didn't have, or maybe they grabbed a newspaper and started looking, and they went to an open house and they got in touch with a realtor. Everybody came at it the same way, and the realtor, their job was to basically screen people to say, are you really ready to buy? And since they were like, are you really, you know, you had a series of questions you'd ask them to kind of qualify them. And if they weren't really ready to buy, you didn't worry about them, because you only had time to deal with the ones that were really ready to buy. And that's all changed a little bit because of the internet. Now people that are thoroughly unqualified and unready to buy actually can go out and look all they want to. So they can get some of that positive stuff. And maybe what your job is, and by the way, if we go a little farther, we'll look down and we'll see that the serious search is a less enjoyable process, but for most, just because it's a really intense process of starting to look at specific houses and research neighborhoods. And usually there's a little more disagreement involved there, and so that's why it's a little bit more negative. Now, you could put that on the scale wherever you want to, but you see what I'm talking about, is that it's a lot more, it looks a lot less like fun and a lot more like work. Okay, then we get to things like home loans and the mortgage application. This is stuff that's really like a trip to the, to the doctor. This is not fun. And it's been described as one of the most negative. It is, I think for most people it is the most negative aspect because it feels like an invasion of their privacy. And one of the things that we can do is use the positive experiences, and during that time, since people like to go out and browse, and they love doing that, right? And they love that easy part of the search. Well, what you want to do is shift these items, which are the home loan, the mortgage application, shift those back into where they actually become part of this. So basically, this piece can be the spoonful of sugar that helps this kind of medicine go down. And the ways that we do that online are we send them out little drip emails that say, hey, look, I know if you need some, if you're ready to apply for a loan, I know a couple of, I have some people that could help you. Be happy to send a list of them over to you, that sort of thing. And by doing that, or asking them questions like, putting the opportunity on the website to become pre-qualified, or maybe you do it when you're talking to them. Once you started a conversation with them, you start bringing the home loan process into it. Well, what are you doing? Well, you're not only making it go faster. What you're trying to do is get the process going and take some of that good stuff that they have, the fun stuff, the emotionally easy stuff, and then you're taking some of the stuff that's not emotionally easy and you're blending it with that so that the process moves forward faster and that they get through it. If they wait till they're totally done with the home search and they settle on the home and then they go, oh, now I guess we got to go apply for a loan, a lot of times that really won't work out. Why? Because they may have gone after more home than they can afford. Or maybe, they may have gone after, they may find the home loan application process really tedious and they don't like coughing up all their private information. I know I'm not a fan of that, but I know that it's a necessary process because I'm in the industry. And so by doing that, what ends up happening is they may not get all the way to the water needs to get all the way to the end of the ditch. I've said that before. And they may not get there. Okay? When they realize how much they can actually afford, either that's a positive or negative. I put it as a neutral, but it could be very positive because they could find out they can afford more than what they thought they could, or it could be negative if they find out that, especially if they've locked in the dream home, in their mind. I'm not talking about on contract. I'm talking about in their mind. They've looked at it and they've agreed amongst themselves, oh gosh, we got to have this home. This is like the perfect home. Well, yeah, but you may not be able to afford that much. So the idea is that this whole process, and then by the way, the negotiation part is usually a negative, and that's something where realtors can really be helpful. And so throughout this whole process, there are things that you can do and tools that you can provide people that will help them, that will minimize those negatives, maximize the positives. Once they've settled on the price and there's a contract in place, then that could be a really positive. Maybe they get into a short sale trap where it takes them a long time to get a short sale done. And you're trying to help them through that, and that could be a big negative for them. They're frustrated because they're like, oh gosh, I really wanted to get this home and get it at a great price, but I also wanted to get it quick, and that may be bugging them. Then there's the inspection trap. Sometimes, after all this, they get an inspection, and this can work for both buyers and sellers. And then they get to the point where they're going along and they have an inspection, and the inspection turns out to be that they find some things that they weren't expecting. Maybe there was a a roof issue or termite damage or something that they have to go back and fix. We all have faced that one many times. So that's what this emotional cycle looks like. And one of the reasons, and I think it's important to acknowledge it, one of the reasons why things have changed is that we can't predict as easily how this cycle is going to play out. In the old days, it used to be a little more set in stone. We knew how things were going to play out. Now we have to be prepared for a lot of different eventualities. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do is try and really focus in on providing them tools. By the way, if it's a seller, if you're curious, here's what the actual cycle looks like. And it starts out, I had a friend once who how they have on Facebook, they have your status, your relationship status, whether you're, in a relationship or single or married or all that. And his status was, it's complicated. And I think that's really key to what we see with a lot of sellers. It is complicated. It starts with, why are they selling? It can be a really big positive that they're selling, or it can be a huge negative. And a lot of times what we deal with most often is we deal with one seller who it's neutral or positive for, and another seller who it's neutral or negative for. And that makes it a lot harder. And then once they've both decided that they're selling, and I'm assuming there's a both here because a lot of times that happens. If it's just them, then that makes it a lot less complicated. Okay, then they go to they say we're selling, and then they've got to figure out how to set the price. And one of the things that most people do or tend to do is they tend to look at the realtor as the final arbiter of the price, the value of the property. They kind of look at you guys like a baseball card appraiser. You go into the baseball card shop, and he says, "Oh yeah, it's worth, $50 for that baseball card." Well, then they expect you to buy it for that, and you're like, "No, I'm just telling you what the market conditions are right now." And that could either be a positive or a negative. Then they have the whole thing about preparing the house for market. What tools are out there for preparing a home for market? What tools are, getting when they get serious about setting the price, not just the initial, hey, what's my home worth, but when they actually sit down and go to do a listing. That can either be a positive or negative when you sit down with a net sheet and actually work through the process. Okay, and again, I know this is a lot of stuff that you've reviewed before, but I want you to think about it in terms of a curve, because their emotions go through those kind of things. And again, it's important to understand the framework of what we're trying to help, and then we're going to try and lay out tools that will do that. And we're going to go through some of them today, but I can't stress enough that the next time we get together, towards the end of the month in a couple of weeks, we're going to go through a lot more of these tools. These tools are designed. Some of them are free, some of them cost a little something. Most of them are free, but the idea is they're ways to help people minimize some of this emotional churn that they feel. Another one is communication from agents. When they get a communication from an agent, it can either be a positive or a negative. Sometimes it's an opportunity for them to vent. As you guys well know, they really tend to wear you out with it some days, and some days they just don't. They just need to talk to you, or just need to know that something's happening and that you're working towards it. And that's always a difficult thing to manage, but there's ways to do that. And then there's the negotiation, which, whether you're a buyer or a seller, the negotiation always seems to be a negative, unless it's really quick and painless. And then when they get to setting the price, it's a positive, or they wouldn't agree to it. And so, but sometimes it can be a neutral, okay? And then if a seller can get just as caught in the short sale trap as anybody else, because they feel like they're providing all this information to the bank, and that can be, that could be a drag on them emotionally as well. And they can find the same experience with an inspection that a buyer does. And the last one is closings. And closings, here's how you know whether you're likely to get referrals from these people and you've likely made them a customer for life. At the closing, if it's a positive experience for them, you will likely have them as a customer for a long time, as long as you keep in touch with them and do the things that you're supposed to do. If it's a negative experience for them, you likely won't. And so really how things wrap up here and the net of all of this is really what is the most important in a lot of ways. I know we'd like to think that we could charm them and things like that, but that's really not the case. It really is the net of their experience that determines that. So that's what these tools are all about, is providing you a better opportunity to have a better experience. Okay, and like I said, marketing technology is always designed to help you improve the customer experience. It's already cool if you're using some of this stuff, but here's something that I want to stress. It's less about bright and shiny objects, and it's more about tools to enhance the communication between you and the buyer, in this case, for the most part, or the seller. So it's a lot less about what looks good and what looks cool, because that really, in many cases, doesn't affect them. Now, does sometimes? Yeah, and that's why I said it's not about bright and shiny objects. It's less about it. Sometimes they need some of that to just, they're neat things to show them, and that can get that wow factor, that ooh and ah factor that you want. Okay. For buyers, let's start with buyers. The search is a positive experience. We want to enhance that by making stuff really convenient. Okay. Let's think about the latest listings that they get. If you send a buyer the latest listings off of your website, like your Treg websites that send out the listings to them, that's a daily or a weekly or whatever dose of positiveness. Wow, there's some new homes on the market that are right here. Let me take a look at those. It's like window shopping, except you're the concierge that brings it right to them. And so that's a dose of positive that you can give them. And so that's always a good thing. The next type of tool is an informative tool that helps them get to the final decision. Sometimes you want them to get through. Maybe it helps them find the right neighborhood. Maybe it helps them find and an example of this would be like crime statistics and things like that. There's always a balance, and the balance is on which tools to provide and which tools do you wait until they ask about. And I tend to lean more towards providing them the tools, except in a couple of cases. Crime would be one of them, and we'll talk about that. But the idea is to make sure that you can there's always a balance, because you can give them too much information and you can cause them to go into overload. And when you cause them to go into overload, then they get that analysis paralysis thing going, and they've got too much information and not enough ability to make a decision about what they really want to do. And that's not a good thing. So that's what you're trying to do, is to make that actually work for you and for them. Okay, I'm gonna check something here real quick. All right, and that should help a little bit more. But the whole idea is that you want to be able to provide them with search tools, information tools, loan tools, negotiation tools, and then there's tools that just manage their expectations. Okay, letting them know what to expect coming next. A lot of times it's uncertainty that creates some of the emotional angst that they have, especially with buyers, because if you can tell them what to expect, a lot of times that takes away some of the hassle, because at least you're giving them the idea of what you want. Okay, let's talk about search tools. Okay, obviously we talked about the latest listings that are on your website. One of the things about the Treg websites that in general, there's a lot of good stuff already on there that they can do, right? In terms of search tools, you have everything that you need. They can search by neighborhood. You can create snippets, right? And if you haven't yet, I would really recommend that you do, and then direct them to the different areas that you want them to go on. You can have them save searches, and I hope that you do that. Is, you can save a search, and then it updates them with that search. That's a great way to do it. They can save a search. You can have them change criteria, and somebody asked me about that a couple weeks ago. It's a great way to do things, is to save the criteria, have them work on it. And so that's the search tools really are all there in the TREG website. So there's all sorts of ways that you can do that. The relocation information tools, it really boils down to several things that they want. The first one is they want information about the area, right? And much of that is contained on the website, but you can also supplement that. And another one is cost of living data, and another one is jobs information, because a lot of times, and if it's a military relocation, for example, the trailing spouse, gets uprooted from wherever they are. They come in and they need a job, or they need to work, or what have you, and so that job information can be crucial for them. School information, I put that in caps because it's important. And then we'll talk about crime data as well. So we're going to go into the cost of living, and I want to take you to my resource, and we're going to start getting into the tools now a little bit. If you go to salary.com, and I've gone through, there's a ton of different cost of living tools, and each of the cost of living tools, believe it or not, all comes from the same source of data. It comes from ACCRA, which is known as ACRA, which is the American Chamber of Commerce's, and they provide the data. And I tried one time to get them to give me the data so I could, or sell me the data so I could put a tool together that I thought was really good, and they want to charge amazing amounts of money for that. But companies like salary.com and bankrate.com and all these others have put together, using their data, using the ACRA data, they've put together these tools. And one of the reasons why I like salary.com's, and I'll give you the URL for it in a minute, but you can go to salary.com. It takes a little bit of noodling around to find it, but I'll give you the exact URL. Is if you go down and you can put in the salary amount, and in this case, this is a screenshot. I just put in $50,000, and I said moving from home, where my home is currently in Long Beach, and I used a coastal town because and a shipping town because I figured doing that to Norfolk is probably a pretty good example. And notice that what I like about this calculator is you can put your home here and you can put your work. So for example, if they were in Long Beach but they were commuting to Los Angeles to work, that would be different than if they were paying for, if they were in Norfolk and they're working in Norfolk. It's not the same thing as, because if they've got a super long commute, and if you know anything about California, you know that there's a lot of people that are what's known as super commuters. They commute for an hour and a half each way a day, and they sit on a lot of busy highways, especially down in the Los Angeles basin. And so for them, it's really, really important that there's that there's something there for them to be able to do, and that's the whole idea, is that their cost structure is going to be different, and this calculates that, where most of the other ones that are out there on the market don't. Most of the other cost of living calculators, they simply have a move from this place to that place sort of thing. And when you hit calculate, by the way, here's what you come up with. The other reason I like the salary.com one is it calculates a really cool little cost of living graph, and it says your net change in disposable income goes up by $7,273 out of the 57. So that's pretty cool. A lot of times, and what I would do if somebody was coming to our area, before I sent this to someone, I'd actually run the numbers, because if they're coming from, Mississippi someplace and they're moving to Norfolk, they may actually be in a higher cost of living area they're coming in. I mean, it still may not be a bad thing to do, especially if they're, and the other thing is, I would not use this necessarily with the military, because their cost structure is totally and completely different because of the fact that their base allowance for housing, and the other things change with each area, and so you have to be careful about that. But if you're talking to somebody who's moving in, the thing that I like about this calculator outside of the other one I told you about was that you see how it says cost of living at home, and it says, you know, it's 27 or 29% less to live in Norfolk versus Long Beach. All right, but there's another piece of the calculation. Your typical salary for the same work is 14% less. All right, so then the difference between those is another 14.6% that comes from you actually netting more money, which is 14% on 15,000. Is this 14.6 is this number right here, and that's where they get that from, and it calculates out. But the idea is it gives you both sides of it. It gives you a truer picture. That's why I like Salary.com's calculator. And here's where to find it, and you can copy it down. I'm going to put a link to it up right below this, and so that you can actually go in and see it. But it's swz.salary.com, cost of living wizard, and it has the other stuff here. You can just type it in. I will put a link below the video when we put it up online, and the whole idea behind that is to make it easy for you. I would save it as a bookmark or a favorite, or you can save it on an email, like an email signature to somebody. You can do it that way as well, and that way all they have to do is click on it, and it's long enough of a it's a long enough URL that they will keep coming back to your email, which is always a good thing, or back to your website. You may want to put a link out to this on your website for the same reason, so they come back to your site. Always a good plan. And remember, the whole idea with all of this is that we're trying to bring them into your web presence. We're trying to take them out of that big ocean that is the internet and bring them back to you. Okay, so the job for the trailing spouse. This is a tough one because it's important these days. It's a lot more than it ever has been. I want to show you a job search engine that's out there. It's called Indeed.com. Now, I actually have done some work inside the jobs industry with some search engine optimization projects that I have. I have not worked for Indeed, obviously, but I've worked for other people. And the thing about Indeed is they have more jobs listed, but the easiest thing, the reason why that you want to use Indeed, and I'm gonna go out to the web now, and I'm gonna pull this up, and let's hopefully this will work, and hopefully it'll pop right up. Well, wait for it. Let's go here. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to Indeed.com. I want to show you why I like using this, and this is one that a lot of people will not be aware of. But you notice that Indeed looks very much like Google, right? And so if I was looking for an administrative assistant position, and I was looking in, and I have not done this, so I'm just going to jump in and do it. So we're just going to look up Norfolk, Virginia, and hit Find Jobs. It pops up, and you notice how much it looks just like Google? That's what I love about it. And you can go right down here, and you can see, department secretary, receptionist, special assistant, executive administrator job. There's all, and you can go right down and search the job as if you were doing. It's a job search engine, and so that's important. That's an easy way, and then you can click, executive administrator job for CACI, and people out there would not know that CACI is a defense contractor, but you can click on here, and it'll take you right to their job site, which I really like that. And so I wanted to show that to you so that you could see what that did. And that's a great tool, and it's simple to remember. It's just Indeed.com, INDEED.com, and you can you can send that to people as a way of saying, listen, if you're looking for a job, a lot of people are aware of Monster, they're aware of Career Builder, they're aware of some of those other ones, but they may not be aware of Indeed. Indeed has many of this, in fact, all the same jobs. I think, as far as I know, there's an awful lot of jobs on there for them there. So that's another good tool that you can use. Okay, I'm going to go back to the jobs for the trailing spouse. So they may be aware of Monster and Career Builder, but they probably are not aware of Indeed. Okay. The other suggestion I have for you is, and this is less of a tool and more of an idea, a technique, is use Facebook and your social media to help. How do we do that? Well, it's really easy to go out. If you've built up a number of people on your Facebook account, a lot of friends, if you send out a thing that says, I have a client who's relocating here, she's specialized, she's been an administrative assistant for the past 13 years, has a lot of good skills and is looking for work. If anybody's interested, please contact me and I'll forward you her resume. And if you get the resume from your folks, a lot of times what they need, especially if they're relocating military, and I'm going to use that as an example, they do not have necessarily a network of people already there that say, hey, listen, I'm going to get you a job, especially in today's job market where it's pretty tight. What they're looking at is if you can help them with that process, A, they can qualify more easily for a home, which is important. B, they're going to stick right with you, and that's going to make them a lot more likely to work with you. And C, it's a great way to remind your Facebook friends of what, and your people in your sphere, of exactly what it is that you do. I hope that makes sense. You can actually go in and connect with people and help, and just you aren't the resource. You aren't going to hire everybody that comes in, obviously, but you're going to be able to connect them with people who do and will. So, okay, let's talk about schools info for a second. There's really a number of school sites that you can go to. A lot of people use, what I like is greatschools.org, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the goods and the bads with school sites in general. Every area in the country has schools that are less than what somebody would want. Okay, and here's a little secret. It's not a secret. It's just a technique that I use in order to help them have a favorable impression about the area when they first get there. It is not steering them. It is just simply helping them see the positive side first. And we're gonna go into great schools and look at but if you look at any area of the country, a lot of times they'll pop up, the schools that they'll choose will pop up alphabetically, or they may pop up by the first one they put in the directory or whatever. But when they pop up on the site, they may be, and they've rated them. Most of these school info sites have ratings and that sort of thing. And so a site like Great Schools, and we'll go there in a second, but what they'll do is they will put them up, let's say they put them up alphabetically. Well, the problem with that is that they could put up a very low-rated school. And in everybody's rating system, there's going to be, 50% of them are going to be below average. And that doesn't bode well for you for making a really good impression of the area. For example, we're going to go to Great Schools, and we'll take a look at some of the areas, and no matter how good of an area you're in, you still could very easily be showing them a site that is, or showing them a school that is low-rated school. And so now what we're going to do is, my technique for getting around that, by the way, and I'm going to show you how to do it, is you want to take them to a highly rated school as an example and send that to them in your email. You link to that school and you say, listen, this is the kind of information that you can get out of here about a school, and this is all the good info that you want. And I'll show you how to do that real quick here. Okay, so the idea behind this, and I'm going to share it with you now, and then we're going to go over and do it. is that they're already going to go get this information online. Okay, they may talk to a friend. That's a possibility. But if they're going to go online and get the school's information, they're already going to go get it. The idea is to guide them so that they're not judgmental about it, so that they don't go out and grab a negative view of your area. So let's go back to here, and instead of this, we're going to go to greatschools.org. Greatschools.org or greatschools.net. It all goes to the same place. Okay. Now what we're going to do is it says search for school district or city, so we're going to go to Norfolk. Okay, and that's pretty typical because a lot of people are coming to, they're transferred. Oops, I did it wrong. I put Virginia here, and what I should have done is gone down to the bottom here. Okay, and just hit enter. This is what a lot of people will see. And I need to move a couple things around to make this work on my end here. Okay. Now it's going out and searching. All right. And it says sort by relevance. That's fine, whatever you want. You can notice that there's different ways to sort it. You can sort it by relevance. You can sort it by school from A to Z, so alphabetical. You can sort it from school rating from high to low. See, and there's no way to, if I could have them do a default, they would do it this way. But what they do is they do it by relevance on Great Schools. And what that does is, give me a second here, I'm going to move a couple things around on my screen. And there we go. Now what they're going to do, you'll see this little green thing here. That's a private school, so they don't rate the private schools. Which is something I do not like about them very much. And now what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down, and we're going to go down to the first public school that we see. Okay, in this case, it says Norfolk Highlands Primary School, and it's got a rating of 10, which is awesome. Okay, but it just as easily could be, let's go down to the next one we find. Oh goodness, they're all private. Let's go to page 2. We'll find one here. Because half the time, all right, here we go. So Lafayette Winona Middle School is rated a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay? You also never know, they have the little reviews here, so you never know what the person doing the review is going to say. And so if a lot of times people will look at this and they'll go, well, gosh, if they saw this, right, or heaven forbid, a school that was rated a 1, right, or a school that was rated a 4, they could look at their own school and they could say, well, gosh, my own school here at home is rated a 6 or a 7, and they would instantly go, well, gosh, I don't want to go to Norfolk. They don't have good schools. And what they're really doing is being judgmental about it. They're not looking and seeing that, there are schools that are rated 10. It's just a matter of finding the ones that are above average. And so what you do is, let's go back to the top, or to the bottom. We'll do that, and we'll go back to number 1. What you do is you pull up this first one that we did, the number with the 10, Norfolk Highlands Primary School, right? And you notice not only is it 10 here, but if you look over here, it says great teachers and really care. My daughter loves it, and blah, and you know what that review is like, that it's impressive. So what you do is you click on the details page of that, and you make that your example. It'll pop up in a second. It's just it says to skip this ad, and they do have ads in them. Okay, come on. Okay, here we go. Norfolk Highlands Primary School, and it has all this glowing information, right? And what I would do is I would copy this, and then I would paste it into an email, and when I send it to them, I'd say, this is an example of the kind of information you can get about whatever school you choose. And so what you do is you go through and try to Sorry about this. I need to close this. Okay, so what you try and do is you go through and you let them know that there are great schools there. So are you really cheating? No, you're just sending them to the really cool stuff first so they get a positive impression of the area. I hope that makes sense. It's something that's important. Okay, now let's go to the next one, which is crime data. Crime data is really difficult. It's a tricky one. We always want to be the source of the information. So in other words, we don't want to, we can't, because we can't steer people, we can't go, well, gosh, you want to stay out of that neighborhood. That's a bad neighborhood. You can't say that. But there are certain people, and usually they're victims of crime in the past of various sorts, that they're really concerned about what's going on in the area. One of the sites that I would suggest that you go see is spotcrime.com, and because of time constraints, I'm not going to go there. But if you go to spotcrime.com, well, let's just go there and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Basically, what it does is this information is really important to some people, and the people that it's important to, it is hugely important to. What I like about spotcrime.com is that it doesn't, a lot of them show an unnecessarily bleak picture. And a lot of times if it's really important to somebody, they will emotionally tie into it. And then they're going to go, when you take them to a tool like spotcrime.com, they're going to go, oh, wow, there's all this crime in this area. Why would I want to live there? And one of the things that you can do to keep things in perspective is have them look at their current neighborhood too. Because a lot of times they get an overly rosy picture of their own neighborhood, and they think, oh gosh, well, because nothing's ever happened to me in my neighborhood right now, then nothing ever will. And so what you want to do is keep that information in context, and you need to say it to them up front. If they live in Hoboken, New Jersey, and they're moving to Norfolk, you want to make sure that they look up the crime stats in Hoboken and compare them to where they are here, so they can get a relatively good idea. And these tools do go down by neighborhood and by mapping it as well. So let's take a look at that. I really want you to see that. So if we go to spotcrime.com, okay, what I love about this is you can put an address in, and we're going to do one. We're going to do my address here so you can see all the crime that goes on around my house. All right, 109 Maplehurst, Jeffersonville, Indiana, 47130. Okay. All right, and you'll notice now in some areas you need to be aware of this, and the reason why I used mine is because in some areas there doesn't show up to be a huge amount of crime. And part of that's just because they don't have the data for Indiana. So, and they do have it, by the way, for Norfolk and that area. That's why I'm using this for you guys. But notice, look at the crime in Louisville. This is Louisville itself, and this is where I live up here. Okay, and it puts a little balloon where you are. But if I was over here, and you can click on this, and you can see, there was theft, there was burglary. Right, and they have that, but it keeps it in perspective. It really doesn't show, some of these sites will actually show 3 years worth of data. And so if they show three years worth of data all at once, it looks like, it's one big criminal fest. And the problem with that is that it just really doesn't paint an accurate picture of what's going on. Or it overly dramatizes it. We'll put it that way. So spotcrime.com, I would use it with caution. I wouldn't use it unless somebody asked me about it, but it is something that you could use, and it is something that you can work with people on. And if it matters to somebody, then it's important to them, and it will, it will provide them with information that they need. You don't want to unnecessarily scare somebody about the crime data. It's a good way to kill a deal or two. And I don't mean that in that you should try and sell them some place that they aren't going to be comfortable with in the future. I just mean you don't want to create so much drama that a place that would normally be a great home for them, you really, that they're scared of moving into, and there's no reason for that. Okay, so now sellers, we're going to talk a little bit about pricing on that. One of the things that I would do, we already talked about Zillow, using Zillow up front in terms of your selling conversation. When you have your sales presentation or listing presentation, go to Zillow, do a Zestimate, walk them through that, because they're going to look at it anyway. Sooner or later, it prevents them from going back there and then having that conversation with another realtor and going, well, how come my realtor didn't tell me about that? If you just say it up front, say, listen, here's what your estimate is. A lot of times, and what a lot of us are finding out is that by doing that, you can actually avoid a lot of hassles just by saying it up front, and especially if the Zestimate is something that's totally off, right? That way you can just trounce that thing right up front and be done with it. Okay, one of the things we talked about doing, but in the past as well, is sending the seller updates on their market info, which is basically just taking the MLS and turning it around and pointing it to the seller instead of the buyer. And that's, if you send out the buyer update, the latest listings on the market from the MLS, all you're going to do from Rain this time is turn it around and send them, say, listen, anytime something changes of price, gets added onto the market, gets sold, or anything like that, it's going to send you an update the next morning. Isn't that great that I'm providing you exactly the information that you need? And, oh, by the way, I do need you to help me out. If somebody puts a FSBO out on the market in your neighborhood, would you please let me know about that? That's a great way to do it. We've talked about that one in the past, but I wanted to bring it back up because I think it's still a useful tool, and a lot of times we hear those things and then we get caught up in the middle of the season and we don't, and we're busy selling and doing stuff and we forget to do it, so it's a good way to go back to it. Then the other way to do it is to take them on a virtual CMA tour. Now, I've mentioned in the past the idea of actually taking somebody on a tour of other houses, like as if they were a buyer, as a means of really, especially if you got somebody who's being really difficult, but say, listen, I don't want to hide anything from you. I want to show you the other houses that are on the market. And one thing that a few of the people that work with me have found really useful is the idea of going out, and let me hit this back up on here, is take them actually on a virtual CMA tour. You take them through the same process that you use when you're doing a CMA. You sit down with them and you say, listen, here are the 5 most comparable houses to yours. And you actually take them through the process of showing them, here's the pictures of the house. You can see that they've got a really cool kitchen, and it's a lot more, and what you're implying is it's a lot cooler than yours. But you wouldn't say that, but you say, listen, this is the competition you're up against, and so I'm trying to make it apples to apples. And that's especially useful. What you're trying to do is give the person that when you got 2 people that are disagreeing on how to price the home in the couple that you're working with, but whoever is the one who wants to reduce the price or fix the condition better, you're trying to give them the ammo to win the argument. And I know that sounds bad, but that's exactly what they need. The other thing is, and I've got to hurry here because I'm running out of time, is the waiting is the hardest part. Planned interaction via technology versus just calling them. A lot of times you end up calling them, and versus sending them something via email or dealing with them personally. By dealing with them via technology, it keeps you out of it a little bit so that you don't get tied into emotional conversations once a week that drain you and drain your resources from continuing to be able to sell. That's one of the reasons for the regular updates on the web traffic. And always we want to be careful, like with the Realtor.com ones, that they understand what the traffic actually is and what it means. But by the same token, what that does is that frees you up. It shows them that you're working and that you're doing things without you having to get emotionally invested. You can send feedback to them via email. I recommend that. Send it to them via email. And even if you just copy and paste it from another agent and forward it to them, or even if you transcribe what the agent says and forward it to them, they look at email as more black and white. They think, wow, okay, you did this. They believe that more. That's got a more of a believability factor than does you calling them and saying, well, The seller said, or the agent that was showing it, the showing agent said, I know we all think that they'll believe us, but trust me, they don't. So it's easier to take it to them via email. They'll believe it. They'll believe it more. They'll forward it to their significant other, and it'll be that neat little argument starter that you need to get the process going. Okay. They must understand the new world of home marketing. The last time they sold a house may have been 7 or 8 years ago, and they don't understand. They still think that it's newspapers and bus benches and all that stuff, and it's not that way anymore. That's not the way that it works. So you can, one of the things that you can do is take them right to the Google listing for their property. So in other words, type in 123 Main Street and show them all the national sites that they're on. Send it to them and say, listen, isn't it great? You're on all these sites. You're on Realtor.com, you're on Yahoo, you're on, well, Yahoo is one of them, Trulia, Zillow, blah, blah, blah. Every single one of them, and you're up on all of them. All right, so you're getting exposure. And what you're trying to do is explain to them that that exposure is not the reason that their house isn't selling. We've talked about pictures. We've talked about pricing things on even numbers, you know, where you price them on like $25, $50, and $100,000 increments to get both of those get exposure. But anyway, so anyway, the bottom line is the waiting is the hardest part for them. That's the hardest thing to do. They're worried, especially this time of year. They're rounding what I refer to as, you know, as OMG corner. They're going, oh my God, my house hasn't sold, and now we're going into the winter. Now what do I do? And we all face that, right? I mean, in this business, that's what it's all about. But that's what they're doing. They're rounding that corner. And so the more you can keep them up to speed on what you have and what you do and how things work, the better off you are. So anyway, that's basically what I have. And I appreciate your time. And next week, or 2 weeks from now, when we go through this, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to go through a lot of these different tools, and we're going to try and go through as many of them as we can. And remember the framework. That's the important part. Remember the framework of why we're doing what we're doing. That's important. It's important to know that we're doing it to, you know, the only reason to have a tool, a marketing tool, is to, you know, improve the user experience. And if it doesn't improve the user experience, then we really don't want to mess with it. So anyway, I hope you have a great couple of weeks, and we will talk to you soon.